In the last 18 months or so, we have seen educators, researchers use generative AI, and even practitioners to a certain extent use generative AI to draft curriculum, sequence topic, write assessment activities, even adapt reading materials and course activities to different learners. That's the promise of the computed curriculum. It's a living, responsive set of materials and pathways that are generated and adopted, updated by the AI, and not just authored as a static set or sequence of learning materials. But while AI has shown promise in that sense, but there are some hard questions such as how accurate is the content, how reliable is it, and what data do we actually need for these personalizations? And even critically, how do we preserve academic judgment, constructive alignment between the materials that we are creating and to the learning outcomes or the professional standards, and more so when the curriculum can mutate week by week. To answer these questions, we have an amazing panel today, and I would like to introduce them. So first up, we have Professor Shane Dawson, who is the PVC College of Education, Behavioral and Social Sciences at the New Adelaide University. Then we have Associate Professor Srecko Joksimovic, who is the co-director for the Center for Change and Complexity in Learning at University of South Australia. Then we have Dr. Aneesha Bakharia, who is the Senior Lecturer, School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences at the University of Queensland. I know Aneesha was one of the very few people when ChatGPT and this generative AI first came up. She was constantly playing and exploring with this technology. She even built a AI tool to develop these courses and so on. So she was one of the pioneers in that sense to play with this generative AI tools. And now recently she has moved into a more academic role, but she is still actively involved in this space. And then finally, we have Damien, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Matter and Space. And I know Damien works very closely with Professor George Simmons in the startup, where they are working with this concept of computed curriculum, using knowledge graphs, using learner profiles to make curriculum that is personalized for every learner. So welcome to the wonderful members of the panel. So to start off the discussion today, I would like you guys to tell me, how do you interpret when we say computed curriculum now, and not like what computed curriculum in 5 years or 10 years would look like? What does computed curriculum look like to you today? Shane, do you want to start?
No. It's a hell of a question, right? So I think, look, basically computer curriculum to me means it's a computed curriculum. So it's driven through data analysis or other aspects to make it more personable. That might mean the content changes, the outcomes may change, the assessment may change, or the sequencing may change to adapt to the individual learner. I think the question is, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we were even close. And I think largely might come out in the panel later in some of the questions, is that I think the way that we're collecting the foundational information about curriculum is not the right way to do it at the moment. I think it's inherently incorrect, and which then means any of the AI elements that we're deriving from makes it also inherently correct. So we've got a little bit of work and foundational work to get through.
Great. Srecko, do you want to jump in?
No, sure. I mean, when someone says computer curriculum, I always think about the paper that Georgie and I are supposed to write, and we still haven't. So it kind of puts some pressure on me, right? But I also think about knowledge graphs as something, and I think that will come again later. Most of the time when we talk about knowledge graphs, the idea of knowledge graphs solve a problem that we don't have comes to mind, but I think knowledge graphs actually do solve a problem that we do have, and I think we'll come back to that later on.
Damien, how do you see computed curriculum from the perspective of when you are building these curriculums? Like, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, so as a software engineer, I guess I approach it as a bit of a shift in curriculum as artifact to curriculum as algorithm. And it's certainly at a more simple level, I guess, even if it's just AI assisted, it's when we are not explicitly authoring line by line the curriculum and relying on AI to provide parts of that that we otherwise, we haven't handwritten, I suppose. But yeah, it's a meaty space that we've been working on for the last couple of years, trying to get our heads around how to structure, architect these systems that can deliver computed curriculum in a guided or controlled a manner, and what pieces of the puzzle are kind of needed to make it safe and suitable for learner consumption and something that we can put our hand on heart and say, actually, I think this is delivering the right outcomes for learners.
Yeah, and Aneesha, you have played both the role of a researcher and a person who has built these AI tools, and I know your AI tool for designing courses and curriculum. Do you want to share your perspective of what computed curriculum means?
So I do think it's some form of agentic workflow that's able to gather context. So whether that be from a knowledge graph or previous course materials or the inherent knowledge that's in these large language models, with a lot of human AI collaboration built in that is then able to dynamically generate or adapt existing resources or plot out new sort of learning plans inside of that.
Great. I think we have kicked this conversation into the right direction, but one of the questions that I'm trying to address with my own research, and I want to throw this question to Shane, particularly because we have been working not computed curriculum with AI, but some of the other curriculum stuff we're doing, and some of the questions that we get from reviewers, and even when we present our work to the academics in our universities, are we taking the academic freedom of our educators? So my question to you, Shane, is if AI can draft a curriculum in hours, what still constitutes curriculum scholarships? What remains incredibly human in this process of creating curriculum?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I come down to the point. Well, I think there's an overarching, and I think Aneesha touched on it, as sort of that human AI interaction, right? The combination of the two to ensure authenticity and that it's actually meeting. I think one of the elements is that the key aspect of the scholarship is, if we take what Gert Biester's work, there's three elements that a curriculum does in terms of the scholarship of the work that we do. One's around the qualification of it, and which is the area of Abhinava that we've been working on, is are we actually designing a curriculum that actually meets the standards and requirements of a professional degree and so on. The other aspect there is around the socialisation of it. And so how are we actually embedding this within the cultural and values and aspects around, that we want for a professional to emerge from their degree. And the last one's around the subjectification of it. And that's where I don't think that we have it at the moment. And that's how we help all learners become independent thinkers, that they can actually adapt themselves, that they can actually be responsible, thoughtful, ethical aspects of it. And I think AI draws on data that to make predictive elements around where they should be. It can respond very, very well. It does the technical side brilliantly. I don't think we've given, as I mentioned in the opening statement, I don't think we've given the right data, the foundation of data that it can actually make the correct choices around where we need to be. So if I look at Damien at the moment and I say, okay, he's doing fantastic in one particular area, AI will never tell that he's just split up with his partner and he's living on the streets, right? Sorry, Damien. And I will be there to help you out. Right, I'll pick you up off Hutt Street soon. So it can't tell that. I think there's a human element in there that still needs to be able to facilitate that learning process and understand the empathy and ethical aspects of it. In terms of the scholarship, absolutely, but AI is never going to be, I'm going to say a controversial aspect. It's never going to be overly creative, right? And that's where it fails. And it's never going to be able to be all aspects of curriculum to a professional degree. It implies a whole layers of subjectivity of what's the standard that someone does or does not meet. We don't have aspects around, say, if I take teacher professional education, you understand how students learn, right? In what context, in what situation, with who, right? Is it in the Aboriginal context in the APY lands in South Australia? Very different context to working in a private school, middle class to high upper class income students, right? They're understanding how students learn in those dynamics is vastly different. So I think that's where the human can come in around that subjectivity, around saying it's no longer a binary. Shane can lift the chair up and move it. That would be an easy aspect for AI. It comes back into that you need these ongoing partnerships and scholarship to feed into those elements.
Okay. I'm going to move to some of the technical aspects of these computed curriculum, and my next question is to Aneesha. Of course, like Shane was saying, we need to make sure that the human is in the loop, not just in this particular aspect of computed curriculum, but any AI tool that we are building for teaching and learning, we need the humans in the loop. But when the curriculum is being computed in real time, how do we ensure, or how do we define accuracy of these AI generated content? Like what validation pipelines would you require before AI generated content reaches the students and when it reaches the students?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. Definitely agree with Shane regarding that. Curriculum is really about setting the graduate attributes as well, and not specifically about generating content. And so for me, the human oversight, and I perhaps don't like just having human insight, I actually prefer humans to be collaborative in the process, would actually be where some constraints in terms of what is generated. And constraints could be that you're trying to still have things that you want included in generated curriculum. Okay, and main things there are really things where the generative AI probably does not know a lot about, or might not necessarily be captured in your knowledge graphs. Particularly our AI at the moment, we don't necessarily have any sovereign AI that's trained on our values and our indigenous perspectives. And so if we're embedding something like indigenous perspectives through our programs, the AI is not going to know about it in any sort of authentic sense. Also things like social learning. There's a lot of generated content and you can do high-level plans. A lot of it's very didactic. Whenever I look at it, we can generate some content, some quizzes, yes, a podcast that you can listen to. The actual activities that people do are not. And that's where the true learning is actually going to occur. So checks and balances for me is really trying to make sure that we're getting the mix and the sort of learning strategy and having some high-level overview of how that is actually being embedded. And then our generation models, if we are doing it, need to model those, basically. And that's how I basically see anything realistically playing out in this particular space. At the end of the day, if we can generate something automatically, a learner can equally use their AI agents to actually do the work for them. And basically, even if we're doing it as curriculum generation, if we're not letting our curriculum designers, our instructional designers, our educators actually play the very active role inside of it, you'll end up with students that actually don't actually even see a future of where their future career direction is going to be with everything being automated.
Yeah, thank you. Damien, do you want to share your perspective of how do we ensure this accuracy in the AI generated content that will reach the students or reaching the students in real time?
Yeah, it's to touch on Aneesha's points, like the way in which we ask a AI to assist us in developing curriculum has to really deliver activities that are grounded in driving that student forward in learning. And I think when we've come at this topic, we started out with pretty ability to try to create objectives for each of our topics that we thought that an AI would probably deliver very well. And we end up having to work through a lot of complexity in how to craft good objectives that would actually drive the student to the right goals or the right outcomes when they were doing an activity in what we were building. I guess we look at it from we have a pre-deployment at things that we can do ahead of deploying a model and things that we should be doing before we release anything to our public. And then there are sort of post-deployment activities as well that we can do that keep improving the feedback, improving the way in which the tool works. In terms of pre-deployment, we need a really multi-layered eval system that can really check against our curriculum and make sure our curriculum follows particular strategies as to how to deal with certain objectives that we might be setting in our curriculum. We can look at adversarial AI that can kind of try to find out whether something's going to go off a path or whether we actually will be getting any movement in that student's learning in that particular agent. We obviously can look at things like bias and misinformation, and I guess things that can actually look up semi-fact checked, I suppose, some of the information to try to just validate whether it is actually on point or not for that data. None of those things are particularly easy, and all of them very challenging. In terms of post-deployment, we also need to make sure there is still mechanisms for students to be able to provide feedback. This seems wrong kind of buttons, things that can actually make sure that the student still has agency to report things that it doesn't think that are right, and ways in which we involve, bring back an instructor that helps make sure that the learner has some authority to get things checked when they think something's wrong, and be able to improve those models based on that feedback loop.
I think you've touched on a very important point, Damien, about student agency in this entire process. Like it is very important that we like while we are personalizing and creating the content, it is also on the students to receive what they want in a sense and allow them that agency to pick and choose what they want to learn, and having them in the mix, to going back to my earlier comment about having the human in the loop in that sense about picking what they want and rejecting what they don't want to learn is also an important factor in this mix. Shane, you've got your hand raised. Do you have a...
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think, I think you do need a level of student agency, of course, but at what age and at what maturity? Right, so I look at some of the classes in South Australia that have used, math I won't name the company, but different math programs that are automated and computer curriculum based on the skill sets and knowledge of students to go through. Kids pick what they want because it's the agency. So they don't go into areas that cause them challenge and uncomfortableness, right? They're not at that mature level. They pick the things that they're already successful at and they do it. So, you know, they won't go into calculus because it's bloody hard, but they'll do, you know, basic arithmetic and algebra until the cows come home, right? So there has to be a layer of intervention, and that's what the AI can't decide. I think the other aspect, it's important to remember that when we talk about curriculum is a temporal element, right? It constantly changes, and it constantly changes due to the cultural values and policy and regulations of government as much as it is on, or industry standards as much as it is an individual instructor's, you know, I want to teach learning theories today, right? So I think there's elements there that there is a paddling of the arses that students have to go through, whether they like it or not, to be qualified for a certain area. You know, so you can't be a qualified, certified practicing accountant if you don't like maths and stayed away from it and all you wanted to do was talk about, you know, I don't know. I don't even know what accountants talk about. What do accountants talk about? Drugs? I have no idea. Anyway, law. So there has to be elements there that they cover all the requirements, and that requires, I think, as Aneesha noted, that human oversight, and that's what the AI can't do. If we leave it up to the individual of the student, they're just going to get on areas that they're intrinsically motivated to complete, which doesn't necessarily qualify them for the full aspect of the degree. So I think curriculum as an individual course, curriculum as a program are really critical to put in line. I think that was one of Aneesha's earlier points. If you can navigate all your way through, are you actually going on a career path and trajectory that enables you to meet the qualifications of a profession? So there has to be an oversight layer on that. And I don't think we're in that space at the moment, maybe in the future, where AI can do that. It can do the individual parts. It can actually do knowledge graphs very well. It can make predictions around what content that I need to do, but it won't tap into skills, you know, like can you actually set up a titration in a laboratory? Right? You can do it on a simulation, but can you actually do it? Can you actually talk to others in a meaningful way in a presentation? Can you actually teach if you're in the education space and you need to go in there? Can you get classroom management under control when you've got a whole heap of horrible Year 9 students running around in a classroom and get them back on task?
Srecko, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I disagree. No, I mean, I just wanted to say I agree. I agree with Shane. I mean, just falling back on the previous question, and somehow we kept going back to your second question around what you mean is human and what's the role of curriculum. I would like to say that if we have most of those things automated, then educators will be able to finally teach, because that's what we want to do. We want to teach. But, you know, if we get AI to help us with all those grading and preparing the materials and other stuff, then we actually might get fast into that space. I mean, when you look back into a few years before the generative AI, what stopped you from learning anything? MIT had their courses on YouTube already posted there. I think they were designed in a much better way than you can actually now get AI to structure a course on deep learning, for instance. And that comes from the years of experience. So AI will never have that lived experience. Like, for instance, if I was to start learning art, for instance, well, I'm a gentle soul, right? And AI tells you to paint a sky, you need to take your brush and take it slowly from top to the bottom, right? And slowly, for me, is totally different from what might be for Damien. And AI will never be able to show me how slowly I should pull that brush and how my move should actually actualize to paint the sky in a proper way, right? So just you know, random example. But on the other hand, Shane touched on this several times. Curriculum is never ends of education. It's just a starting point. There should be an intention behind why we structure certain curriculum. And that's whether I want to find a new job, whether I want to just learn something for fun, but there has to be intention that still remains uniquely human. And that basically where educators come to play and decide, hey, and all those standards and all the topics that Shane talked about. So there has to be intention. We have to bring that curriculum to life. And of course, you can choose what you want to learn, but at the end of the day, you have to show the evidence for certain competencies in order to expert enough in certain domain. So yeah, just your point.
When you mentioned that AI would not be able to distinguish what it means to move slowly to paint the sky blue, it's going to be different for you and Damien. It means that we are hitting that concept of personalization. So, am I right in understanding?
Yes and no. I mean, one thing is when we personalize content in a sense that for instance, I want to become a data scientist and I don't know, a cybersecurity specialist, which content I need to learn to get to that part. One thing is when Damien is debugging the code and then he needs totally different input from the knowledge graph, from the course content, from AI agent to solve his problem. But there is another thing there where not everything is myself sitting and typing on the keyboard. There are a bunch of things that you need. I mean, even with virtual reality and augmented reality, you can see, for instance, the engine. You can see the how, and inside of the aircraft, for example, whatever the problem you might whatever the topic you're learning, but how you work with this, which kind of force you apply to turn the screw on that engine, that's something that AI can't really tell you. That's something you need to experience. And I'm more talking about not necessarily about personalization, but about that lived experience that educator brings to the classroom that AI doesn't necessarily have.
Okay, all right. There is a question in the chat, and it's open to whoever wants to take it. Why shouldn't AI generated or AI assisted curriculum be tested proactively and post implementation on course design quality guidelines such as Quality Matters or OLC scoreboard? Then why by definition rely heavily on human judgment?
All right, I'll dive in. I think it could be. I don't think there's any issues around why not. I think there's lots of different measures against what a curriculum does or doesn't do. So I've got people dying in Adelaide by the sounds of it going past, so my apologies for that. Hopefully they're okay. I shouldn't make flippant jokes. It was a fire engine. That's better. Anyway, I think it definitely could be tested against a whole range of it. There's a whole sets of different evaluations that go through, whether it's, some of it for initial teacher education. I'll keep coming back to that one. It's measured against the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. So we do. And then there's the quality indicators of learning and teaching, which is, again, another scorecard that goes against it. All our curriculum and outcomes and the student graduate qualities are aligned and tested against that. I think you could pick up something like the Quality Matters or the OLC scorecard. They could well and truly do it. I still think you need the human subjectivity in there because, again, the cultural values and aspects are different according to, and that's not picked up in Quality Matters or the OLC scorecard, right? That will differ again against other aspects there.
Okay, I'm going to change gears a bit, and I'm really interested to touch on this topic of personalization today, and you guys have briefly talked about it in your discussion today. And we have been talking about this personalized learning, not just with AI, but we have been talking when ITS first came out, oh, we're going to provide personalized learning. But we haven't seen the impact to the extent to which we would have liked. But there have been now studies that personalization at scale in higher education context can be possible with these technologies. And I think George is going to support me when I say that personalization is very much a reality. So how do we ensure that while we design these adaptive systems, it widens the opportunities for our students rather than narrowing them? Aneesha, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I guess a lot of this is, and there's probably a lot of lessons to learn from just the impact that personalization has had via social media, with, feeding you streams of information and then targeting it directly to you. I think for me, I think there's an element of personalization where that should more be focused on things like knowing what you're good at, as Shane was saying, and trying to get you into that sort of productive discomfort, where you'll actually be learning and then take you on that particular journey. The true problem with being able to do things at large scale is, I guess, making sure that we're not generating too much and we can actually pace the learner through it, I think. But there's also a lot of opportunities. So particularly in advanced topics or people that want to surge ahead as well. And this is where I think things like, I absolutely love this particular topic, which happened to be the advanced calculus. And I actually want to dive deeper in it. This is not previously offered at the university that I'm at. Can I get something generated for me that then takes me further and actually adds value from what we're doing?
I'm just going to wear the hat of the devil's advocate here and challenge what Shane said earlier, that so we know that if a learner is not self-regulated, then he might choose the easier route instead of needing what he needs to learn to become an accountant, a data scientist, a cybersecurity specialist. But then how do we personalize content if we are forcing them to learn stuff? Like, is there a balance between interest and what you need? How do we go about doing that, Shane?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's Srecko, dive in. You go. You had
I was going to say, because I do agree with Shane to that extent that there has to be the evidence of certain skills and certain competencies in order for you to say, hey, I am data scientist now, right? So you can't just go and read the introduction to deep learning and say, yep, I'm the expert. Nobody would let me do the surgery if I watched a short YouTube video on neuroscience, right? So the personalization doesn't come from what you necessarily need to know and demonstrate. It comes basically how you learn about it. Because for me to learn about the calculus, it might be the matter of spending a week going through all the basics from, hey, 1 + 1 is this, and then all the way building up to what I need to learn. For Aneesha, it could be, yep, I know this. So it's basically not, it doesn't always mean that you and I will learn different topics. If you are to become data scientist, you need to know about neural networks. How you learn about it and which aspects you don't know, that's where the personalization actually kicks in. That's what I would think.
I think there's an alignment between, as Aneesha, I think, can't remember who said, but the career goals and aspirations of what someone wants to do, and then there's realities of having the qualifications to get there. Right? And I think that's where we can have a presence absence of content, skill acquisition, and so on, and checklists to be able to do it. Absolutely. I don't think personalization is ever in a space where if we're trying to qualify someone for an aspect, right, it's not on-the-job skills training where, and Aneesha's example is that I really want to learn more advanced calculus. I think that's pretty common with most people who actually do want to do a lot more advanced calculus. It's a missing area. Then you've got someone who's intrinsically motivated to go and do that. What do you do when you need advanced? Well, a calculus at a bare minimum, and people don't want to do it. That's the difference, right? And that's where you do need that. It doesn't mean that you can't have a personalized aspect of it. And I think one of the areas that maybe we haven't really spoken a lot, and Srecko did touch on it, So we spoke about student agency, and there's a level of student agency which maps to maturity and self-regulated learning, if you like. But we haven't actually spoke about the teacher and what is the computed curriculum providing to an individual teacher that gives me deeper insights and Srecko touched about in terms of doing my job. He spoke about it in terms of speeding up workload efficiency, but there's also an element to be involved, to be the motivator, to dive in and help and nudge students in particular ways as well. So less of a director of learning content, but becomes more of a facilitator of the learning process. And I think that's where we're definitely heading towards. But that computed curriculum has to provide two aspects, right? So one will always go back to the teacher as what's the information I can get about my class, my learners and others, because there's standards and there's other things that we are just not going to be able to shape or change. And that's the government aspect, the socialization of education and where it fits in society and how it's purpose of education. It's from kindergarten all the way through to career pathways and so on. I'll pause there and let Aneesha did have a hand up. I didn't want to take anything of her thunder.
Aneesha.
Oh, yeah, I think you addressed what I was going to try and raise is that a lot of people have aspirations, and so they know what they want to become, but even in choosing the pathway, they might try to take the easier routes or focus on things which they find a lot easier inside there.
I think in terms of the question of how do you prevent a system from narrowing and lowballing the education system by providing too much agency to the learner. I think that's there are some things we can still build into our systems to make sure that is not a thing that is pervasive in the way you build. I think when we came at it from matter and space, we wanted to make sure that we looked at it was what was the best teacher you've ever had and what are the properties of a best teacher you've ever had. And one of the very quick ones you come to is somebody who is pushing you and striving you to do better. So what you can codify into your applications is some form of upward default, that it is always pushing a little harder than where you are currently at. I think that is probably something we need to be baking into a system like this, because otherwise you end up shifting too easily on, oh well, you didn't quite get that, and you keep lowballing the response. The other interesting one is that you will collect data on somebody and you'll find that they are struggling and you want to pitch it at their struggling level. And that's kind of a natural kind of thing, but you have to still be, as you said, still consider that aspirational aspect of where they're trying to head and keep pushing them back to that aspirational spot where they're trying to head. Otherwise, just taking them where they are at the moment, you will keep them at a level where they were. So something that actually, you obviously want to use that knowledge gap to use the knowledge you have on them to find gaps in their knowledge, but you don't want to use it as a way of lowballing where they are and where they need to go. So I think those pieces of it. I think the other interesting one is that diversity in assessment, how you actually build in assessment mechanisms that aren't necessarily easier, but they do demonstrate like a chaining of knowledge or mastery that demonstrates that you have chained knowledge in an area, and that you end up still having a holistic sense that you understand what they know at the end of that work. And I think that's probably the hardest piece to pull together, that chained knowledge, and how you codify that is really challenging in these systems.
And sorry, Shane, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested in Damien's perspective again. So we collect a lot of data around students at the moment. I don't think we collect the right data, right? So I don't think there's any university that says, okay, Shane, why are you actually going into business? Why are you going into, what's your long-term career goal and motivation here? What is it you want to do in your life that can actually get into that? What do we know about the individual learner in that process, right? So we assume when they go into a degree that their whole intent and purposes, which is in Australia at the moment, the government perspective, when anyone goes into education, of course they want to be a teacher. But when we find out, over 50% of our graduates leave within the first 5 years, it's like a new arts degree, right? They pop up everywhere. They pop up in HR, they pop up in policy areas, they pop up all around. So their degree is clearly transferable into different domains. But we never ask about that. So when you talk about codifying aspects into around the personalisation, that's one. We don't know about the learner. I think the second one is we don't actually know about the curriculum. So we have, and I'll give an example there where you spoke about hard coding in an assessment and diversity of assessment side. Commonly, we will have an assessment item, and let's just take the random example of an assignment, right? You've got to write an essay, which I know that's not as authentic as it was 3 years ago. You have to write an assessment, and that will have 3 outcomes attached to it, right? And then at the end of that, you get a grade of 50%, with the assumption is that you passed all 3 of those outcomes, which may not be true. So we never actually really deeply understand to get to the level of personalisation of where am I actually being taught and assessed or undertake or practice an outcome so that I can actually then personalise. So they tend to be bundled in big blocks of a course, and a course can be 13 weeks, it can be 10 weeks, it can be 6 weeks, but it's still a bundling of crap that has to go through that you're coming up at the end to say, okay, you have now passed the course. The course is always not just one outcome, it's multiple outcomes. And then we go to the assessment to see where those bits are. I don't think we've done a very good job in education to say, this is exactly where an outcome is, and this is where it's duplicated. So I don't even care if I fail it in this course, but I do care if you fail this outcome because it's not taught again until second year, or it's expected at a higher level and so on. So I think there's missing data in being able to get to the space that you're talking about in general education.
I think you touched upon again a very important topic about data. So I would like to ask Damien, what kind of data are you guys using to create this computed curriculum, to personalize the curriculum to the learners, and then throw it back to Shane and Srecko and Aneesha to counter if that is the right way ahead for us. So Damien.
Yeah, so the types of data we've been collecting information around prior knowledge and skills, and that's obviously try to understand where they're at versus what we're about to teach them. Learning velocity, so sort of the time on task and how well they complete particular activities. We have sort of quiz performance data as we assess particular activities. We understand how they've gone, where they're continually getting things wrong or right. We sort of also, as we progress through activities, all activities, we kind of decide what are the key metrics for doing well in that activity and try to get sort of just LLM as a judge to also help identify where there are gaps in what they've said, where they've missed points, and try to keep coming back at the questions in different ways to try to find out whether that gap is just something they've not written about correctly, or whether they do literally need to be reshown more content to produce results in that space. And we have engagement patterns, so how frequently they would get into the application and to what their study habits are when they're using this tool. We don't tend to keep very much data on demographic specific information. Our system we also touch upon in the way we build our tool, a wellness system. So we're also looking at other things that make human development possible. So we're trying to look at not just the learner as a learner, but as a human, and try to find information about them that might help them become better learners by making them better humans, I suppose. So things like information around fitness, sleep habits, and things like that can actually make a big difference in their overall habits as a good student.
And where does knowledge graph sit in this mix? How important is that?
Yeah, so our curriculum itself is structured as knowledge graph. We have programs codified through modules, units, and the like, and objectives for each of our activities. It's a combination of the way our agentic system kind of works as to how it behaves when we come to teach something on a particular topic. So we have a pretty dynamic system that allows us to use it's probably about 18 specialized agents that kind of take a student through phases of learning. So we kind of have codified our form of learning into sort of these specialized activities. They go through like a planning phase, a situating phase. They learn some content. They are then asked to apply some content. There's some assessment and then some reflection. So we take them through a series of activities in each of the areas that try to teach something, prove that you've taught something, get them to apply something, get them to be assessed on it. So try to bake that into the way in which it navigates that graph course, and so that you end up getting sort of like a tree of the knowledge, but you come back up the tree as you finish off the module. So you start diving in deep and then you kind of summarize out of a particular course.
Yeah, so in that sense, the fundamentals still remain the same in that we start from the top with the learning outcomes, the skills and the knowledge that the learners need to acquire or demonstrate or learn, and then go down creating the learning activities and the assessments that help them get that knowledge or the skills, right? Anybody else? I know, Aneesha, you also did some work in that space. Do you want to share?
So I guess my thinking on this is really we're heading to, if we're not already there, basically, of a particular time and place where we are going to be very content rich, but time poor. And that essentially leads us to, and some of this has actually been problems and things that learning analytics has tried to address for a long while. But there's just different types of data that need to be collected that focus more on the process and progress of learning. And not all of that can be tracked by someone sitting at a computer, basically. We need to be less quiz-based and end product artifact-based inside there. And ultimately, I think just the measures of self-regulation. We need to, everything, all the progress that learning analytics has made need to now be incorporated into our systems. Because some of the worst uses of AI, particularly in terms of students' insecure assessment and things like that, is really because people come in to use it at the last minute, and very simple prompts, take directly and then submit it. And so if we can get learners to actually balance that better, get authentic, secure assessment in the process, and have these new measures then incorporated, I think we could then be much more personalized.
Srecko.
So no, I completely agree. The thing is, we talk about the agent. We talk about how much agency learners will have, but it's not just about learners; it's also about the educators. So to me, the question of how much data we need is not up to us to answer. I think it's up to the educators and learners to tell us how much they are willing to share and accept. Simply, the role of educator is changing. So I might want to become the guardian of the meaning. I want to guide you on your journey to your profession. You want to become data scientist. Okay, let me help you there. But there is also the role of educators is also changing in a sense that we have more time to provide care for our learners. So as an educator, I want to engage and care about my learners as well. So I would love I'm walking from one building to another to my class, and there's the agent that tells me, hey, most of your students are doing fine. Those two are struggling, they struggle with this topic. These three need help there. Those five didn't sleep well last night. So it's basically what kind of support students want to get from us and how much are we ready to support them on that journey. Because let's be fair, AI cannot provide that social connection, as Aneesha said at the beginning. So they need to engage with someone with their peers, with educators to build that social connection. Maybe not everyone is willing to support that. So just the bottom line again, to me, how much data we need is for the negotiation between educators and learners. How much you want, how much personalization you want, what kind of value you want to get out of this, and how much I can offer as the educator. Sorry, Shane.
Shane. You're muted. Sorry.
I said, oops, I was actually being disparaging about the Brisbane Broncos, so it's probably appropriate. Couldn't let that one slide, Aneesha. Oh, look, I was going to add in a third arm, right? So, you know, and the work that you've done, Abhinava, around looking at our initial teacher education programs and identifying various clusters of students, how they navigate through the curriculum and where their good or their weaknesses are. And so in terms of meeting the standards for professional standards for teachers. And I think and while we can identify, you know, some students are brilliant at understanding the theoretical aspects of how students learn, when they stand in front of a classroom, they're not as dynamic as our panel here in terms of their presentation techniques. So it falls down. Others are just engaging, wonderful teachers, and they build a rapport really quickly with their class, and they're obviously very effective in that domain, but they don't really understand why they build activities in a certain way. So they're sort of lacking that theoretical or design elements that go through. So you've got these different clusters. And while I know the computer curriculum, we could absolutely navigate them through to, you know, some teachers shouldn't have to take the full 4 years. Some should take a lot longer than 4 years, and some should spend more time in practice, and some should spend more time in the classroom, right? So the difficulties that we're confronted with is not just the student, the teacher, but there's also the industry regulation aspects of it and the timing of what's, you know, the accreditation bodies and the university systems themselves are being, how do we actually navigate through, which then gets compounded again around how much am I actually paying for my degree? Right? So if I actually have to pay for a course and go through, then you kind of expected that that's the duration of it. You do this course, then this course, and this course, and that constitutes an entire program. You have met all the curriculum standards of that program. Now you're qualified. If we speed things up and down, there's also, it complicates matters as well in terms of the regulatory aspects, the financial aspects, the economics of the university, how we actually change systems to be able to accommodate this. And while I'm confident that there will be massive disruption coming for education more broadly, we're not quite there yet. So I think when Damien talks, I absolutely agree. I think we've got buckets of data. We've got huge amounts of data. I still don't think we've got the actual right data. But if we're bespoke from an education system itself, we could absolutely be a lot more flexible, right? You could be a lot more targeted. You could be a lot more fluid and adaptive in how you want to get there. But when you've got to work within the system of that administrative arm, the regulatory arm, alongside the innovation arm, that's where you're going to have a lot of conflict and bashing come along. And I think, and just to pick up on one of the comments around diversity and assessment that others have made there, I think the point, I would love every day to be an assessment day. Every day, every time you design an activity is an opportunity for feedback for students, which in essence, it's an assessment. So why do we always wait for a Saturday? You have to submit your assignment when we've seen students work through it. Why do we have exams that are invigilated sitting in a town hall somewhere by, you know, a lot of people walking around making sure you're not cheating, right? So why do we have to present on a particular day that you've met the standards of that? This is where computer curriculum could jump in now and demonstrate that we can meet those standards through other data collection mechanisms that align with particular assignments. I only will cover all of them, but certainly through particular ones along the way.
I'm just mindful of the time. Before we end this session, I'm just going to ask like a final question and then wrap the session up. Like, we've talked a lot about AI, like the possibilities of AI and what of computing curriculum in real time and so on and so forth. But we know that these technologies are not the most reliable. We know that the content that it generates we're not there yet. So in that sense, when we are generating AI, or we are feeding the AI generated content to the learners and the content is inaccurate, who is the fall guy? Is it the vendors who are producing the models? Is it the institution, or is it the instructors whose name is on the course? Your take on that. Srecko, do you want to go?
Okay.
Aneesha, yeah, go.
So I think in a way, large language models do hallucinate and can get things wrong. But in recent times, particularly, I've been challenged because if you take some of the more recent models like GPT-5 Pro, that's the one that's really expensive and takes a long time to think about things. I challenge anybody to take a document, paste it in there, and ask it to find errors. It will find the most minor errors and false things inside of it. And so I do think we can make use of those technologies in our agentic workflows. That's not the overall solution. Some of it is still going to be human AI collaboration. But some of it, particularly if we are dealing with adult learners, we are also training them to be critical thinkers, and they're going to be working with AI all the time themselves in what it's generating. So there's some of that fact checking that I think can still go back to the learner in this context.
Any final comment, people, before we wrap it up?
I definitely see it as like we've got a multifaceted way of solving for this. We as learners have to be teaching them to be better at learning, and that is not necessarily what the content we're teaching them, but to be good fact checkers, to obviously inform them when we are using where we get data from and where data is generated from, or who's generating it, but to help them realize that even truth and fact is a very tricky beast to navigate in any topic, and that we have to be good at finding multiple avenues of where information comes from, regardless of where it's come from. There's a chain of accountability required to make sure that what we're delivering is suitable as an institution, as an instructor, and the large language models take some blame for this as well. But we have to be building processes that deal with risk, find out where the biggest risks are, and make sure we're trying to cover as much as possible those gaps in risks, and obviously not lean into the areas that are most high risk, and try to find avenues to resolve issues where we're teaching, where I think AIs can become too problematic to use.
Yeah, I don't know why we always blame AI for everything, but we've been dealing with misinformation and related issues since the invention of the printing machine, right? So the AI just killed those things up. We just need, as Aneesha said, and everyone else pretty much in this session, we need to make sure that our learners are critical thinkers, and not just learners, but educators as well. We just don't take anything for granted, and make sure that we think through what we're engaging with. Thank you, man. Thank you, everyone.
Shane, final comments?
Thank you everyone. Appreciate everyone's time. If you're up early or you're going to bed late, it's fantastic to be able to have a chat. Best wishes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the panel members and everyone who joined us for this really interesting and exciting session. And thank you all for joining.